Hello everyone, welcome back to another talk. There's a lot of conversation currently about a variety of things, but today I want to talk about the interesting decline of the red pill movement, as what people are calling it. But I prefer to see this more as the awakening of at least some portion of the incel audience. What do I mean by this? Well, a couple of weeks ago, I think it's been now, Sneeko basically revealed that the whole red pill thing that he was pushing was a grift. It was for money. He didn't believe anything of what he was saying, which was fairly obvious from his lifestyle, but that's a separate conversation. And that he was only really talking about all of that stuff and siding with the people that he did purely to grow an audience. Right? An audience he knew would be there, an audience he knew would be vulnerable, an audience he knew was desperate. Basically, the same audience that Andrew Tate targeted for the same reasons. And he's not the only one sort of leaving that movement. And that's because their audiences are. And this is something that isn't talked about a lot behind the scenes, but that's because their audiences are realizing what they were talking about doesn't work. Which a variety of critics to these types of content creators, who I'm going to refer to as red pillars, because that's sometimes how they refer to themselves as. It doesn't fully encompass them, but we're going to use that as an easy term. But anyways, critics of the red pillars very frequently pointed out that their advice was at best impractical and at worst an outright lie. Right? All of these goons flexing fake wealth and claiming that they did this, that, or the other thing to achieve that wealth, when behind the scenes they were really renting that mansion and that car for a day and just spending the whole day filming videos and taking pictures with them to pretend they're wealthy. And again, the only real intention there was to gain an audience to get that ad revenue, that sweet ad revenue, and sponsorship deals. It was easy because, again, their target audience was desperate, was lonely, uh, was feeling lost, and here are these lunatics coming up and pretending to offer a solution, and pretending to prove that they have that solution by pretending to be wealthy. But eventually, the audience catches on, because as time goes on, more and more people are going to take that advice and find out it doesn't work. And they're going to leave the community, and their friends in the community are going to ask, well, why did you leave? What happened? We miss you. And they're going to say, well, I followed this advice X number of times, and it didn't work. So there's something going on here. I don't think it's real. And then the friends will examine the words a little more closely. They'll pay a bit more attention to critics of this content creator, and they'll come to the same conclusions and walk away, and their friends will ask what happened, and so the role continues. Obviously, that's not going to wipe out an entire audience, but that's generally how one loses an audience. This is generally why the red pilling movement has sharply declined, because honestly, again, a lot of that advice was nonsense. In some cases, it would actively shoot a guy's attempts at finding love in the foot, right? There's numerous stories of women discovering that some guy is an Andrew Tate fan and immediately walks away because Andrew Tate promotes highly unethical methods of being in a relationship. I'm going to leave that description there. But I think that we can agree that that's a fairly apt description. Which, of course, some people catch on to and some people don't when they first listen to him. Actually, they don't usually catch on to it when you first listen to him because he sugarcoats it. It's usually about halfway through. But anyways, the crux of the problem here is that now these guys who, some of them are incels, some of them are not, are once again lost. They don't have guidance anymore because obviously these red pillars are, as time goes on, proving to be wrong. And who else are they going to turn to? Right? There's no one else really popping up and trying to genuinely help these people, these guys. And add to that the gradual rise of the femcell, and you've got a interesting and I think mildly explosive situation developing here that nobody's really talking about. But this is very specifically why so many people are also so willing to adhere to a content creator and follow them even if they're provably wrong, right? A lot of people online wonder how parasocial relationships form, why they're so common these days, and such things as, well, it doesn't make sense. It makes perfect sense. People who form a parasocial relationship with a content creator do so because that content creator, in their eyes, is fulfilling something in their life that they're missing. If a person develops a parasocial relationship with a content creator based on attraction, that person, that audience member, that viewer, is lacking romantic love in their life, or possibly sexual experiences in their life, and they associate that content creator with those, right? And so even if that content creator is highly negative or provably wrong or just a bad person, that doesn't matter because that's not what they're there for anymore. They're there for the illusion of that relationship, right? Even if it's obviously not real. And I picked this because this is what people typically go to as a example of a parasocial relationship, is that romantic or that belief that a romantic or a sexual relationship exists between the obsessed viewer and the content creator. And this is actually generally something that OnlyFans creators or more sexually charged content creators look for. They want to develop a certain level of that, right? Not necessarily to the point where the person goes and, burns their car or something, but they want to promote a certain level of this, okay? Despite their claims that they don't want it, a lot of them do. A lot of them want a low-level parasocial relationship with their fans that will keep them emotionally invested in them so they will continue to financially invest in them, right? It's just business. But the same thing also happened to the red pill content creators, but it wasn't romantic or sexual. It was parental. A lot of these red pillars came in pretending to offer advice and pretending to be successful. And some of their vulnerable audience, lacking a strong male figure in their life, latched onto them for that father figure type relationship, and that's why so many of them cling so desperately to these content creators. This is why every time you insult a given member of the Red Pill movement, you get attacked. These are people who need that content creator to be right. It's not a matter of facts or even opinions at this point. It's a need. This person needs to be right to continue fulfilling that father figure role. And again, this is something that Red Pillars really specifically want. They want to develop that kind of fatherly relationship. Some of the younger ones want to go for that mentor-like relationship, mentor and student. But the older ones absolutely are looking to create and promote that sort of fatherly aura, right? And this is why it's such interesting conversation when something comes out about a red pillar or a red pillar leaves the movement, because they're basically leaving behind the motivation to be presenting as fatherly, so the message changes and they lose a lot of audience who now either have to find someone else in the red pill movement or they're lost, right? Unless they're lucky enough to find somebody actually sane who fills that role in. And then again, you've also got a variety of people who create that parasocial relationship because they lack friends, and that content creator is like a friend to them, right? This is how a lot of parasocial relationships with Let's Players forms, right? With the prank channels, the vloggers, all of these want that sort of, oh, we're friends type thing, right? This is actually why a lot of content creators in creator houses a lot of times are fairly... This is why a lot of content creators in general actually have this very interesting struggle with parasocial relationships. Ludwig is actually a great example of this, because at various points in his career he has both promoted and discouraged forming a parasocial relationship with him, specifically on the basis of seeing him as a friend. Because on the one hand, for public-facing reasons, public opinion reasons, he needs to discourage parasocial relationships because they are considered societally very bad, right? But on the other hand, he benefits greatly from people perceiving him as a friend, from people seeing him as a friend, and they all do. Hell, I do. If you perceive me as a friend, that is great news for me, right? And it's not necessarily inaccurate. Out of the 3 different types of parasocial relationship, this one is probably the most plausible to believe, because friendship doesn't have to be someone you know in real life. Friendship can exist online just as easily. It's a matter of being there for each other relatively regularly, which content creators, if they have a schedule, will do. It's a matter of having views, not necessarily the same views, but open to having a discussion about these views. It's a matter of having, kicking back, relaxing, and having a good time with each other, which can also happen if a content creator kicks up a game, starts playing, they have a great time, you sit down later on, watch that gameplay, in that commentary, you have a great time. That's friendship in a way. It's a bit odd, the communication lanes are a bit odd, but it's totally plausible, right? And whenever people describe a content creator as someone they perceive as a friend, that's one form of parasocial relationship I'm actually not going to criticize, because unlike the other 2, which have very unique problems in terms of them being parasocial relationships, the friendship one can actually happen. In fact, I was actually just watching a content creator I just discovered the other day. They were playing Arma 3 with their patrons from their Patreon, who are also their viewers. And they're all on pretty good terms. That's friendship, and it's not like they play every day, nor do they talk every day, but you could very easily define them as being friends. And you could call this a parasocial relationship, and you'd not be entirely wrong. But friendship is there. Right? Now, with the romantic or sexual parasocial relationship, obviously, it's really tough to have a one-sided romantic relationship. That just doesn't work, obviously. That needs to be reciprocated. That needs to be two people in a relationship. And obviously, content creators aren't going to be in a relationship with members of their audience. Usually, it sometimes happens. I know a couple of content creators who met with some fan, they fell in love, and they developed perfectly normal relationships, but they physically met, they physically dated, right? We're not talking about dating or whatever. And then, again, with the father figures, the main problem with the mentorship type things is that a lot of them are just trying to develop that type of relationship to scam their audience. They're not genuine about it. Right? To some extent, this is still potentially a plausible parasocial relationship to have, because who you see as a mentor is totally up to you, and there are a lot of people online, and I'm one of them, that does give advice, that talks about life, that does things like that. The problem is a lot of them are just looking to get money out of you, right? It's just, there's nothing necessarily wrong with perceiving a content creator online as a mentor or instructional figure or something. The problem is by doing so, you open the door to being roped into some scheme, right? So, despite how society perceives parasocial relationships, a lot of them are fairly plausible. This is, in fact, why society generally focuses on the romantic or sexual parasocial relationships as whenever they talk about bad parasocial relationships. That's why. It's the one that's not plausible. It's the one you can't really sit there and claim actually happens. You can't watch someone online, even if they're doing sexual things, you can't watch someone online and assume you're now in a relationship with them. That's not how that works. And anybody who does so, I don't genuinely believes it. I think they're just looking for an excuse to be weird. Right? It's totally fine to find someone attractive. That's not what I'm talking about here. There are plenty of attractive people making content. That's totally fine to find them attractive. That's not what I'm saying here. I'm saying that the jump to finding someone attractive to assuming or imagining you're in a relationship with them is a big leap. Right? Because you haven't met them physically, and they're extremely unlikely to be dating you even if you do meet, and it's just taking the whole thing too far. Right? That's a huge jump. It's not really a big jump to watch somebody's content and they've become a mentor in your life in some facet, whether they're a father figure or a mother figure or whatever. But that mentorship relationship can absolutely form depending on how the viewer takes some given message, right? And again, the same thing can happen with the friendship thing, where how you perceive friendship might actually be less about parasocial nature and more about you genuinely perceive this person as a friend. But this is why a lot of people cling so desperately to given content creators, even in negative situations, right? It's just they just go all in emotionally on that in one way or another for whatever reason. And that's why a lot of people become so dedicated to the parasocial relationship. It's a need at that point, right? Because, again, these parasocial relationships form because the viewer is lacking some specific thing in their life. And this content creator is fulfilling that specific thing in their life. So they need that person to fill that role, right? I'm never surprised when people jump up to defend bad people who make content. It never surprises me, because these are people who have formed a deep emotional need for those people and really desperately need these people to remain on that pedestal that that viewer put them on. And I'm not going to blame... I very rarely blame the viewers, the defenders of these people, on this, because they have developed this because they're lacking something in their life. And they absolutely didn't choose to lack that thing, right? Nobody chooses to lack mentors. Nobody chooses to lack friends. Nobody chooses... Well, some people choose to lack love, I guess. But they don't... The people who choose to lack love don't form parasocial relationships around the concept. But anyways, the people who form these parasocial relationships don't choose to lack love. They just do. And so they're just defending something they feel a genuine need for, and I'm not going to blame them for that. I think they need to make some adjustments to their lives, right? They're not doing something. They're not socializing. Maybe they are spending time in the wrong places and they're not finding these mentor figures. I have mentor figures in my life, for instance. I have friends as well. I haven't formed any parasocial relationships with anyone because there's nothing for me to form a parasocial relationship around. There's no concept or emotion that I'm lacking that would cause me to form such a parasocial relationship, but that isn't true of everyone. I'm very fortunate in that way, right? But that is a big reason why people are so desperate to maintain parasocial relationships. To some extent, I would even argue that parasocial relationships are necessary. An actual honest mentor-like relationship between a content creator and an audience member isn't by itself a bad thing. It's just that it's so easy to exploit. That's the real problem there. A viewer viewing a content creator as a friend, not necessarily a bad thing. These parasocial relationships can create a good enough facsimile of what that viewer is missing to fulfill that need in their lives and maybe make the next day easier to get through, right? I've seen a lot of stories of that. And that's fine. That's wonderful, in fact. So I'm not going to sit here and necessarily say that parasocial relationships are bad. The ones based on on the belief that there is a romantic or sexual relationship, that's bad, right? You can't support that logically, right? But the mentor one and the friendship one, absolutely. I'll support that. The only thing I would really say is, besides don't imagine yourself in a romantic or sexual relationship with the content creator, be very careful with who your mentors are online. There is a lot of scammers, there's a lot of fraudsters about, and while they're extremely common in certain spaces, like the crypto space, that doesn't mean they aren't lurking around elsewhere, right? So, I do have to say that you should really be careful with who you regard as a mentor. The friendship one, you can actually, that's pretty easy. You just find a different content creator that you really can, that you enjoy, that you can really sort of be comfortable sitting down and watching, right? That one's easier to replace, but the mentor one is a danger. That's a risk to you if you pick the wrong people. So just be very careful, alright? But with that being said, thank you all very much for listening. If you liked this, please like and subscribe. If you didn't, please ignore me. And if you have any comments, questions, concerns, ideas, suggestions, or requests, please leave them down in the comment section below. And thank you all very much for joining me, and have a great 24 hours.